What can we expect in the upcoming Donald Trump administration? Join Richard Ebeling and me in this week's Libertarian Angle as we examine that question. Hi, I'm Jacob Hornberger, president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, and welcome to this week's Libertarian Angle. I'm joined by my co-host, Richard Ebeling, professor of economics at the Citadel. Richard, good to see you again.
It's great to be with you and our viewers and listeners in the wake of the recent election, which we're going to spend a little time talking about, I guess.
Yeah, this is our first post-presidential election Libertarian Angle. So this is a good opportunity to discuss what we should expect or can expect from the new Donald Trump administration. Uh, Free markets, free enterprise, private property, limited government, right, Richard? I mean,
What? Oh, yeah, of course. Of course.
All
Uh,
right, so enough of the jokes uh, and the ridicule. Let's just talk seriously about what we can expect. Number one, clearly immigration. I mean, we're going to see a massive crackdown. And there's no question about that. This is not going to be your mild-mannered Clark Kent. This is one of the reasons he got into office. People said, "Oh my gosh, the immigrants are invading us, and we need to do something." And so it seems to me, Richard, that he has to fulfill this campaign promise of mass deportations. They're already talking about declaring a national emergency. Trump declaring a national emergency. Now, you look back in history, emergencies are the time-honored way where you have the excuse to take away freedoms. And I mean, it's one of the hallmarks of dictatorship, emergencies. This is one of the reasons, if you search the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, you will find something significant. There is no emergency exception in the Constitution. It doesn't say, well, all these restrictions don't apply if there's an emergency, because they understood that emergencies are the biggest opportunity for rulers to exercise dictatorial powers. Well, that's exactly what Trump's going to do, and there's precedent for this. He did it before when he was president, when he didn't have the money to build his wall, and he broke his promise where he said, "I promise I'm going to force the Mexicans to pay for my wall here, my beloved wall." He didn't do that. And so he declared an emergency so that he could divert monies away from the military or something like that to build his wall. But now he's talking about this mass deportation plan. And it's a virtual certainty that he wants to use the military here. And but this is supposedly a civilian country. The military is not supposed to be involved in law enforcement. But if he declares an emergency, oh boy, now you can exercise these dictatorial powers where the military is conducting sweeps and raids, and there's precedent for this too. Back in the 1930s, they were blaming the Great Depression, the unemployment on Mexican citizens that were living here illegally. And Roosevelt said, shove them out. They're the reason. They're taking jobs away from Americans. The same kind of nonsense you hear today. And so, like in California, they would sweep across public parks. And if you didn't have an ID on you and you looked Mexican American or Mexican, they just picked you up and deported you. And there were a lot of American citizens that got deported too because they didn't have their IDs with them. They're like their birth certificates on their person. So I have absolutely no doubt. So you're going to see an America that we haven't seen possibly in our lifetime, with these sweeps and raids and snitches. And let me make one final point here, that even if he succeeds in this endeavor in the process of militarizing America, the malaise that has come with the welfare warfare state way of life, the failure of it, the war on poverty, the war on wealth, equality and of condition, and the drug war, the massive failure of this system, out of control spending, out of control debt, is not going to go away. These people are Donald Trump's and the right wings and the left wing too. They're all the statist scapegoat. They're one of their scapegoats. And rather than confront that it's their beloved national security state, the Pentagon, the CIA, the NSA, their beloved welfare state, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, farm subsidies, that are the root cause of the problems this country is facing, they look for scapegoats. And so even if they get rid of a large portion of these scapegoats with their mass deportation plan or their expansion of the Berlin Wall through the stealing of more people's property through eminent domain, they're going to find that the malaise that comes from their failure of the welfare warfare state is still going to be here. Only it's going to be a society with even less liberty than we have today. What do you think, Richard?
Well, let me just sort of amplify one or two points you made. You know, this idea of a national emergency, this is only one particular form of what has emerged with increasing presidential power with what are called executive orders. This ability of the president to get around the congressional and legislative process to try to implement things that Congress doesn't want uh, because he doesn't have the votes, but which he wants to implement. Uh, as an example of being fair and balanced here, Biden trying this too with relieving college students of their college loan debts, and how the courts have tried to tell Biden you can't do this, and he keeps looking for another executive order way to get these bond. So the problem is the fact that the president, particularly since the 1930s, and certainly in the post-World War II period, has been able to accumulate due to emergencies or crises an increasingly wider band of arbitrary authority where he can allocate money, he can implement policies. Another thing that we need to talk about besides the immigration issue, obviously, is Trump's clearly to be implemented protectionist trade policies, where he doesn't even have to go to Congress to have Congress pass laws imposing taxes on imported goods or higher taxes. He has these executive authorities that declaring an emergency of one type or another, he can just raise tariffs, limit the importation of foreign goods based upon his caprice and discretion. So basically, when people have talked about the imperial presidency in the past, these are instances of it. This is when you give one man, regardless of political label and the party he's run on to get into that high office, when the president is given wide powers beyond what the Constitution specifically says, and certainly its spirit would call for, to be able to basically act as an emperor. I decree, I command, I insist. You will not do, you will do. And this is part of this. And he will use these authorities and powers to implement what could be a draconian deportation of millions of people. This will be the largest this could be the largest forced migration of people in all of modern history, if the numbers that he's talking about are true. Certainly the greatest since the forced migrations of population at the end of the Second World War. But then if I can just switch gears here to what I was saying, is that another thing that he clearly is talking about, on day one, that is on January 20th, is that he's going to be implementing these policies. He's talking about across the board 20% higher import tariffs on goods in general, particularly European goods, 60% or more on goods imported from China. His insistence upon strong arming other countries for them to go along with what he wants. This will be, not only is this an example of this executive authority, this imperial presidency, implemented only by him rather than preceding presidents, the economic disaster that this will cause. In spite of what he says, it is ultimately the consumers who will pay virtually all of this import tax. The foreign producer has his costs of manufacturing in his home country, including his labor expenses. And then he has the transportation expenses to bring his goods from across the ocean to the United States. Now, any foreign manufacturer, producer, supplier who is doing this is doing so because he estimates that given his production costs, the transportation and related expenses, he believes he can sell it at a price that would still accrue to him uh, a break even or preferably a profit. Now, the import duty is just a tax. It's a cost of production for him, and he will attempt to include it in his expenses based upon his estimates of what consumer demand will be. And the fact is, the selling price will rise. There is elasticity of demand. Consumers in America, all other things held the same, will tend at the higher price to buy less of the good. How much less will influence what his revenues would be. But the fact is, consumers will end up paying more for the good and purchasing less of it. Now, when you pay more and you get less, that's called a decrease in your standard of living. And it's not just consumers, that is the ultimate consumers who buy the finished good, the Chinese toy or the Swiss watch. It's also the fact that many sectors of the American manufacturing parts of the economy import inputs, raw materials, resources, component parts. And if this is included in these import duties, then this is going to make it more expensive for American manufacturers to be able to get a hold of all of the necessary means of production, component parts, resources, raw materials, etc., to make the product that they are selling to Americans right here at home. So that's going to raise other prices in the United States looking down the road. So in his belief that it's the foreigner who pays, no. What will happen is that the American consumer and the American producer, who in any way, shape, or form uses a good or an input for their purchases or manufacturing, are going to pay more and have less of it. And as a consequence, that will further reduce the standards of living. And one other point, Jacob, if I may. Well, if foreigners earn less from selling goods in America, they have less dollars to buy American commodities in one way or another, which will negatively impact American export sectors. And if the foreign governments believe that they can effectively retaliate against Trump's tariffs, then they will themselves be making the American export industries under more stress, which will affect more American businesses, affect more jobs in the export sectors of the American economy. So regardless of the rhetoric he uses and the rationales he tries to present, looking down the road, just from an economic point of view, this will be disastrous for every person in the United States. And that's, of course, separate from the issue is, who is he to tell you or me what product to buy and from whom, based upon the quality we're looking for at the best price that we think is offered by Joe instead of Sam? And if Joe is in another country instead of Sam and I prefer Joe's, whose business is it of Donald Trump to tell me I can't?
Yeah, you've hit on the both sides of the border issue. I mean, over the years, Richard, we've heard the term isolationism, that when we call for an end of U.S. military interventionism in other countries, oh, you're an isolationist. But the real isolationist is what Trump is doing here. He's isolating America from the rest of the world while advocating a omnipotent military interventionist philosophy around the world. We should be striving for the exact opposite, where you rein in the government and you free the American people to interact with the people of the world. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. Many years ago, when we started out the Future of Freedom Foundation, and you were vice president of academic affairs, I was the president, and we published this book, The Case for Free Trade and Open Immigration. And notice that we put the two things together.
Yes.
We're talking about trade, we're talking about immigration, okay? Because it's the same issue. There's the book, okay? Free trade and open immigration. We're talking about cross-border interactions. And that's why we published this book. And you're hitting the nail on the head. What this guy wants to do is erect a wall, not only to keep out immigrants, but to keep out goods, to keep out foreign goods. And as you point out, he doesn't need no stinking Congress. He just issues a decree. I don't want those Chinese goods. I'm imposing a tax. I mean, King George would have loved this kind of power and to start trade wars. But here is the most important thing with respect to what we do here at FFF. We are about freedom. And that's oftentimes lost in all this is that when you have these massive controls over people coming into the United States or goods coming into the United States, at the very same time you are destroying the freedom of the American people. It is our freedom that's under assault. It's easy to think in terms of, oh no, Jacob, he's just going to deport those Mexicans. They're going to send those people back or the Haitians back or whatever. Or, oh no, it's the Chinese goods we're keeping out. No, this is a control on the American people. On the good sides, it's saying you will be subject to my orders on what you can buy and what you cannot buy, or what price you're going to pay, or what tax you're going to pay. I control you. And when I issue my decrees, these are controls on you, the American people, because he makes it look like, oh, no, this is a control on the Chinese. And it's the same with immigrants. The more that he exercises control on the movements of people coming into this country, he needs to exercise control over the American people. I mean, even small, what would appear to be a small thing like a highway checkpoint. I mean, those highway checkpoints in the Southwest, that's not a free society. When the state is stopping you and demanding identification, that is a deprivation of freedom. And it's like, how do you boil a frog? People don't see that you boil a frog by not throwing him into a vat of boiling water where he's going to jump out. You put him into the vat of cold water, and then you start turning up the heat slowly. And that's what they've done with these immigration controls over time. People become accustomed to them. Oh, it's no big deal. But it is a big deal, because the more he tightens up, the worse it's going to be with respect to our freedom. And that's why I guarantee you people can count on the Future of Freedom Foundation to take this man to account as he assaults in ever greater ways the freedom of the American people.
Yeah, the additional danger to all of this, and again, I'm just going to emphasize the trade restriction aspect right now, is that what he basically is attempting to do is to reduce the extensiveness and the benefits of an international division of labor. Think within the United States. There are some parts of the country, some state somewhere, who specializes in making product X because they have a comparative advantage, better labor skills, the resources, the raw materials, the inputs, the manufacturing capability in terms of efficiency. And that state sells some of their goods to import the goods from another state in the US. Now, would we view ourselves as a better off country if Florida had import restrictions on some product that normally Floridians would be buying from Washington State? Or would the people in Washington State or Oregon or Montana view themselves as better off if those states imposed import restrictions on oranges? So that now, if you wanted oranges, it was going to be protected to grow them in hothouses in the American Northwest. It would be considered absurd. Everyone would be worse off, both in the individual states and in the territory of the United States as a whole. Well, this is what Trump is proposing for the global economy. And if every country feels uncertain or restricted in what it can import or export because of what the other country is doing, then that results in the political establishment of that country feeling, well, we're being cut off from international trade. We have to produce things at home. You move countries to self-sufficiency, to autarky, which means all of us are made worse off, both in terms of our liberty to make our own choices in the marketplace, in the social settings of human intercourse, and in the economic sense that we increasingly make ourselves poorer by making each country and the people in each country rely upon the homespun rather than importing that which is more efficiently made and at a lower cost in another country, and buying it with what we can sell and produce better or less expensively or both to that other country, which they can't do reciprocally as well. We are damaging the international order upon which the prosperity of people all around the globe have been benefiting. Now, has it been a free trade world? Of course not. Governments have regulated, controlled, restricted, negotiated. But what Trump is proposing is a massive exacerbation of the restrictions on the right of freedom of trade as well as immigration. And we will all be socially, personally, and certainly economically made worse off by this. It's going backward. It is regressive. It is returned from the developed to the more primitive in economic well-being and the logic of people's associations with each other. That's what makes this so dangerous and damaging.
Absolutely. And it's not just economic well-being that's under assault, it's our freedom that's under assault. And a related issue here, Richard, are the sanctions and the embargoes. He's a big believer in these things, where the U.S. government imposes sanctions or embargoes on the people of foreign lands, which again are a deprivation of our freedom. If you look at the Cuban embargo, I guarantee you he's going to be renewing that and strengthening that because the commies are over there in Cuba running Cuba instead of some U.S. puppet. And so, but it's not just the Cuban people that are going to suffer from this or continue to suffer from it, along with their socialist system. They're like in a vice, where one side of the vice is their socialism and the other side of the vice is the U.S. embargo, squeezing the lifeblood out of them. It's the American people who lose their freedom too. You know, you go to Cuba and you spend money there without the official permission of the Treasury Department. I guarantee you they will, as soon as you return, you step foot back in the United States, you will be under a federal criminal indictment. And they will do their best to send you to jail just for traveling to Cuba and spending money there. And then there's Iran. I mean, you can already see here Donald Trump's going to do everything he can to strengthen the sanctions against Iran. He's thirsting to go after Iran. And you know, Richard, I really feel sorry for the Iranian people. I mean, they again have suffered under this vice of a very bad economic system, but then the U.S. sanctions have just impoverished them. And it all stretches back to 1953, where the CIA ousts the democratically elected prime minister. And they put in the Shah of Iran, which is just this horrible dictator. And I mean, that's where it's all rooted in, is foreign interventionism. But instead of just leaving Iran alone and leaving the whole world alone with respect to U.S. government intervention, the Trump mentality is, oh no, I got to double down and one of the on Iran and the Iranian people, I got to make them suffer even more and possibly even start a war with them, which to me would be a pretty easy war. I mean, they've been suffering under sanctions for how many years? It's got to have really weakened the regime there. But I am kind of interested in this indictment that they just issued against Iranian officials for conspiracy to murder Trump. They're saying, well, the Iranians are trying to assassinate Trump. And why? Well, they don't use the word assassination. They use the word kill because Trump killed, they said, an Iranian general. Well, how's that different from murder? I mean, you know, and we pointed it out when it happened that when Trump conspired with military officials to assassinate an Iranian general, we're not at war with Iran. Well, where does he get the authority to go around assassinating people? And why wasn't he indicted for conspiracy to murder? The conspiracy clearly took place here in the United States because he's immune. He's a king. The Supreme Court has said he can kill whoever he wants anywhere in the world. It's part of his job. But what about then immunity for people to say, oh, well, you mean if the U.S. can assassinate people, why not every regime assassinate people? Oh, no, no, no. That's not the way the empire works. Richard, this is why we need to just stand fast and continue to raise people's vision to a higher level on what it means to be a moral society, one whose government is truly limited, one that is a limited government republic, a free market society, rather than one that's going around assassinating people and inducing people to retaliate, interventionism, sanctions, embargoes, trade restrictions, trade wars, immigration wars. This is a very bad trajectory in which this country is on. And the only true trajectory really is the libertarian one.
Just one element to this. Many supporters of Trump have said it was important to defeat Kamala Harris because she is the face of the progressive left, with a lot of dimensions to that, but one of them being, oh, they're the socialists. They're the ones who want to control and command and direct society, how we live, how we work, how we do this and that. Well, I hate to tell some of these people, but Donald Trump is a socialist central planner. Now, he's not going to nationalize the means of production. It'll be more like the fascist type model where people own the property, but the government basically tries to direct or command or, quote, nudge them in the directions that the president wants. But this is what his tariffs are partly about. I want to bring industries back to America. I know what sectors of the economy need to be restored or expanded. And I'm going to do all in my presidential power to command, control, regulate, tax, subsidize, penalize, to make the American economy directed, shaped, formed, and patterned in the way that I, Donald Trump, believe will be the one that makes America great again, as I defined economic greatness in terms of what America produces, how, where, when, and for whom. That is central planning of economic affairs. And the fact is, for the next 4 years, he will attempt to centrally direct the US economy into the patterns, structures, forms that he considers the right ones. And therefore, he is an enemy of the free market, of allowing production to be guided by private entrepreneurs based upon their pursuit of profit, which they only gain by making the goods in the qualities desired and at the best prices possible, as they're anticipating that we, the individual consumers, which means all of us, would prefer to have. How, where, when, at what price, and for whom, guided by the market, rather than Donald Trump's imagining of how the world could be made better in America. Well, isn't that the usual left-wing utopian dream? I know how to socially engineer the world for a better future. Well, Donald Trump, you're just one of them.
On that insightful note, Richard, we'll wrap things up. I guess the sum of it is that what we can expect from the Trump administration is more assaults on liberty and more assaults on our economic well-being. But here at FFF, we will be standing fast, making the case for the free society and the prosperous society and the moral society and the harmonious society. Richard, it's always a pleasure to talk to you, and I look forward to having more of these sessions after Trump takes office in January. And I look forward to talking to you next week.
Till next time.